All right, we're in chapter 9 of the book of Chronicles, and we've seen a lot of things happen in David's life and in Solomon's life, and we're about to see the close of Solomon's life. But Solomon was one who was extremely wise and extremely rich. God had blessed him with that. But we're going to start here in verse 1 of chapter 9, and the Queen of Sheba is going to visit with Solomon. And when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem, with a very great company, and camels that bear spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. So, she traveled a long ways. It probably took her maybe a couple of months or so from where she lived to get to where Solomon was at. So she was determined to see him. And she had heard a lot about him, and the fame of Solomon was going everywhere, all across the different countries, because of the wisdom that Solomon displayed. Kings from all over the world were coming and inquiring of Solomon. And this is one instance where the Bible shares of the queen that came to visit with Solomon, and she brought him some presents. She brought him spices, and that day they were worth a lot of money. So she brought him spices and then gold in abundance. So, they just keep racking up the gold. I tell you what, I need to find where all these folks lived at or something. Go there with a metal detector. But, they had plenty of it. And Solomon told her all her questions, and there was nothing hid from Solomon which he told her not. So every question she had, Solomon was able to answer it, and he really told her really all the secrets of his wisdom, wealth, everything. And it all stemmed from God. Because, I think I mentioned it last week. When God had shared with David that Solomon would be the next king. And, David had pretty much, he knew he was getting old and, feeble, so to speak. And, he kind of stepped down and went ahead and gave the kingship to Solomon. And God asked Solomon, what would you want me to give you? What would you want me to do for you? And Solomon, it was the best answer. Because he said, just give me wisdom that I might judge your people correctly. Most people would not have asked for that. If God were to say to people today, what would you want me to give you? I'll give you whatever your heart's desire is. Most people are going to give me some money. I want a big bank account, and I don't have to worry about money no more. But Solomon didn't. He could have. But he just simply asked for wisdom that he might judge God's people correctly. What an answer. And what a heart, really, to have. And so God told him, I'm going to bless you with wisdom. But because you didn't ask for long life, you didn't ask for money, you didn't ask for that all of your enemies would be killed and all this, you didn't ask for anything but wisdom. God says, I'm going to give you the wisdom, plus I'm going to add all these other things to you. I'm going to, God's good. If we'll follow in God's will, if we'll follow him and desire, God, just use me, whatever your will is. God, give me the ability to do whatever you place before me. God would be pleased with that. And you don't think God won't bless you for that? Yeah, He will. That doesn't mean He's going to just bless you with a pocket full of money. As I've shared many times, there's a lot of other blessings that are much greater than money. You know, seeing your family saved and friends saved and seeing them serve God and, you know, these kind of things, that's better than anything that money could buy. So, but, you know, Solomon shared with the Queen of Sheba everything. We hear a lot of times, and I've probably said before too, that Israel came up short in being the light to the world that God wanted them to be. You know, most of Israel did. But Solomon is sharing with these folks really about God and how good God is. You know, she brought a big, huge company of people with her. You're going to travel 2 months, you're not going to travel by yourself. Traveling through the desert and this kind of stuff, you know, she had a huge crowd with her. Plus she had all the animals that she had to haul all the gold that she was bringing and the spices and, you know, all this stuff. So she had to have people with her to help take care of all this stuff. So. But, you know, she just wanted to see the king. She wanted to see King Solomon and she wanted to see if what she had heard about him was true. And the Bible goes on and says, when the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon and the house that he had built, you know, when she saw that, you know, this man is wise. Not only that, when she saw the house that he had built, you know, it took him a long time, about 20 years, to build all this stuff. You know, I think last week it shared 20 years. So, you know, it took quite some time. So he had a huge mansion. It wasn't a 3 or 4 bedroom house. It was a huge mansion. So when she saw and experienced the wisdom of Solomon and saw the house that he had built, and it goes on and says, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, his cupbearers also, and their apparel, and his ascent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. You know, she was about give out from all the traveling. And, you know, that's what it meant by that there was no spirit left in her. You know, she was give out. But she did, you know, she was getting to experience all the things that she had heard about Solomon. And then, you know, even Jesus mentioned in the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 12, verse 42, it says, the queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, for she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Even Jesus mentioned about the Queen of Sheba. And, you know, she had heard about God. And when she saw all the apparel that they all wore, you know, not only was Solomon arrayed in just fancy clothing, the best that money could buy, so were all of the people around him. She was amazed at what she was seeing. You know, I would probably venture to say the folks close around her didn't have nowhere near the immaculate clothing that these folks around Solomon had. So, but she was amazed at all this, and just the meat on his table. You know, he had the best of everything. He could afford it. So, and she said to the king, it was a true report which I heard in mine own land of thine acts and of thy wisdom. You know, what I heard was the truth. Everything I heard about you, I'm seeing that it all was the truth. That just your wisdom and everything that you do. You know, wrote is amazing. And, you know, to be around somebody like that that's really wise and showing really that they love God, because, you know, he was, while she was there, he was witnessing to these people about God. That's what Jesus mentioned about the Queen of Sheba in the book of Matthew. You know, this lady come to know the one true living God. So, and then she says, howbeit I believed not their words until I came, and mine eyes had seen it. And behold, the one half of the greatness of thy wisdom was not told me, for thou exceedest the fame that I heard. She says, you go way beyond what I'd ever even heard about you. You know, what I was hearing was only about half of what you can do and how wise you are. And, you know, she was thankful that she was able to come and experience just being around Solomon. Could you imagine being around somebody so wise, that was blessed of God, and so wealthy? And his wealth came from God, because God gave it to him. You know, it's amazing how all these people come. Just like with the Queen of Sheba, it says that she brought spices and gold in abundance. You know, it's amazing how these folks just bring it and give it to him. He just gets more wealthy and more wealthy. But God told him, that's what I'll do, because you've asked for wisdom to judge my people. He said, I'm going to give you all these other things too. You know, it's amazing how good God is. And you know, we serve the same God today. He hasn't changed. Does God bless people today? Yes, he does. He blesses us every day. Now, he may not bless us with all of our wants, but I tell you what, he'll bless us with our needs every single day.
Ain't none of us went hungry anyway.
Yeah. Not one of us has went hungry. You know, and there's people going hungry every day. There's people right here in our country that go hungry every day. There's people right here in our county that, children and adults that go to bed hungry every day. You know, I've been seeing this guy. I don't know if y'all seen him or not. I have no idea who he is. But I've been seeing this guy. He's walking around everywhere, and I've seen him the past couple of days. About 5 o'clock or so, he'll be sitting up here in front of the old gas station right there across the road from Rite Aid. And he's sitting under the shelter there, just sitting there. He's toting a guitar everywhere he goes. I've seen him with it out and playing it some.
He's sitting
around
out there,
different
in
places.
front of the little restaurant right there, and all that, right where, what
Haley's.
you call it, them used to have the church,
Haley's.
and all, he played right there.
I seen you over there.
Haley's,
There's the
he
coffee
had
shop
Haley's
thing,
there.
Haley's
He sat
coffee
there and
shop
played outside the door right there.
Red,
Yeah, because
It's
he was,
red.
I think it
red
was,
hair.
I hadn't noticed. You know, he's I think he's had something, a hat on or something. I'm not sure what color his hair is. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing maybe he's homeless. I don't know. I see him all over everywhere. Now, whether he is, now if it's the same person you're talking about, I don't know. Is the
I think
guy
I've seen two
homeless or?
different ones. I'm not sure. One of them I know, the other one I don't know.
but this one sits up there just, I know, I saw him up there Sunday morning, he was, whenever I come by, he was sitting up there.
That old gas station?
Well, right there at the.
That restaurant there?
Not
Sitting-
churches, but
He's
there,
sitting on,
Haley's.
Haley's.
they have a
Mhm.
bench or something
Yeah.
sitting out there, and he was sitting on it. A little big.
But, you know, I thought about yesterday when I saw him, I said, I wonder, you know, does he go to bed hungry? You know, and I wonder, does he even have a bed to sleep in? You know, it's sad. I know somebody told me that the Methodist Church up here was taking in some homeless folks and keeping at their Family Life Worship Center. I guess that's true. I mean, I had somebody tell me that anyway. And so maybe he's got somewhere to sleep. But, you know, this lady she was amazed at all that she saw, all the food on his table, everything about him. And she says, everything, it doesn't even come close to what I was told. It goes way beyond what I was told. You know, and she says, I didn't really believe them until I came and saw it myself. Sometimes it's hard to believe things, and you just got to see it for yourself. That's the way the Queen of Sheba was. And she went on to share. She says, happy are thy men, and happy are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee, and hear thy wisdom. You know, it would probably be a great opportunity just to be, you know, at that time, in that time period, to be in the presence of Solomon, to be one of his servants. I mean, you'd be well taken care of. You don't have to worry about anything. Take good clothing, you know. But she took note of that even his servants, the ministers, the cupbearers, you know, and a cupbearer in that day was not somebody that just brought him a cup. A cupbearer was one that, especially for the king, they would taste the wine or whatever they were drinking before the king did, to make sure nobody had put any poison in it. You know, that's, you know, Nehemiah. In the book of Nehemiah, if you read the first chapter of that, he was the king's cupbearer. And that was his responsibility. He would test it out before the king took a drink to make sure it wasn't poison. Do what?
That's a hazardous profession.
That's a hazardous job, you know. The king gonna wait a little bit before he takes it. He gonna see if you kick the bucket first, and then you know, he'll get him another cupbearer. But, you know, the Queen of Sheba went on and she says, blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighteth in thee to set thee on his throne to be king for the Lord thy God, because thy God loved Israel to establish them forever. Therefore made he thee king over them to do judgment and justice. And that's what, you know, that's what Solomon desired. God, just give me the wisdom that I might judge your people correctly. And she notices that. She sees that. And she's like, you know, you're really blessed of your Lord God. So, you know, is Solomon sharing with her about God? He's got to be. He's got to be telling her about their God, because, you know, we serve the same God. Even though a true devout Jew today, they serve the same God we're serving. They don't believe in Jesus Christ. They don't believe Jesus Christ was the Messiah. They believe he was a man, or at the most they'll give us a prophet. But they just don't believe that he's the Messiah. But now there are some Jews that do believe that Christ was the Messiah. Those are the true Jews. That's the true Israel. I think we preached on that a Sunday or two back. But you know, she's taken note of all these things, that how God is really taking care of him, and God set him on the throne for this purpose. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, which is a pile of gold. That's a bunch of money. And of spices great abundance, and precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. So any kind of spice they had, she brought to him. You know, and you know, spices in those days were expensive. They were worth a pile of money. You could use spices in these days really as money. You could trade spices with people for stuff you needed. So, you know, spices were, if you had plenty of them, you were a wealthy person. But not only did she bring a pile of spices, you know, she brought a pile of gold.
We just got 450 talents of gold last week.
Yeah.
Now there he is getting 120 talents this week. That makes 590 talents of gold that he's gotten there in just a short time.
You know, how in the, you know, where do they store all this at? Where's it at today? That's what I keep, my mind keeps going, you know, and I love scripture, don't get me wrong, but sometimes, you know, I think about things I read in scripture and I'm like, well, where's that stuff today? You know, what has happened to all the gold they put into the temple and building it? Took a pile of gold and silver. Where's it at?
Not in Fort Knox, is it?
we may not even have any gold
Probably
left in
not.
Fort Knox now. They've probably gotten rid of all that. But at one time, our money was backed with gold. That's when we were really, our economy was better off when we were backed by gold instead of just on our word. You know, I'm glad our word is that good around the world, but, you know, the dollar was worth more when it was backed by gold than it is today. So. But, you know, she's brought him a pile of wealth just from this one queen. And the servants also of Huram and the servants of Solomon, which brought gold from Ophir, brought algum trees and precious stones. So, you know, these precious stones, it's not like that, you know, they're worth a lot of money too. You know, they weren't bringing fool's gold in there, the rocks and this kind of stuff. And I mean, they were bringing rubies and diamonds and whatever kind of stones you got out there. You know, jasper and onyx and all these kind of stones that are really worth some money. So, you know, it's, and then these algum trees, you know, Solomon was going to use this for something. And the king made of the algum trees terraces to the house of the Lord and to the king's palace. So, you know, he's making terraces. And harps and psalteries for singers, and there were none such seen before in the land of Judah. So, you know, here he's making very fine instruments out of these algum trees, out of the wood. You know, I don't know if there's, I guess there's still algum trees somewhere.
That's in the family of the juniper tree. I read it.
Juniper tree?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's
Uh-huh.
if you polish them up.
Little dictionary.
That's-
Well, I've been studying some of this on the internet. And also, they use it for dyeing wool and silken and woolen cloth too.
Okay.
It turns it ruby red.
Thank you, Brother Laverne. You keep studying that, you know, looking at this stuff.
I got
Look at that.
it.
He's got it wrote down now, I'm talking about.
Well, I'd never heard of it, and I said, "What in the world is that?"
I'd never heard of an algum tree, but I didn't think to look it up. I didn't know really what kind of tree it was.
The king learned.
I'm glad he did.
Well, I didn't.
because
I know you use a lot of different kinds of woods, but I'd never heard of that. So.
Right. And King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, besides that which she had brought unto the king. So she turned and went away to her own land, she and her servants. So, you know, Solomon, he was nice to her. He shared with her all the wisdom all the questions, he answered all of them, and, you know, anything's probably that they didn't have in her country that he had, he gave her a good portion of it to take back with her. So, I mean, he wasn't stingy, you know, and so he just shared with what he had. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year, wow, 666 talents of gold. That came to him in 1 year. So, you know, wow. Besides that which chapmen and merchants brought, which are traders, merchants, traveling salesmen coming around, they would bring all kind of stuff. And all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. See, now, we're just talking about the gold, over 600 and something talents, 603 score talents.
You don't have to build him a house just to put his gold in.
Yeah. He might have had a Fort Knox over there. Had some bunkers over there. Which back when Solomon was living, all around Israel was green. I mean, a lot of greenery, but now today it's really rocky and sandy, and the reason is, you know, if you go back and you read all the scriptures of what God told them would happen if they turned away from Him, that's what happened. You know, a lot of their land became unproductive, wouldn't grow anything, and so God was true to His word. And God still is. And that's why it's so sandy and rocky and rugged over there now, because they turned away from God. And God did exactly what He told them. Your land will not produce. And King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one target. And these are huge. And 300 shields made he of beaten gold. 300 shekels of gold went to one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. So, you know, they got a house just that was made from the forest of Lebanon. So, a lot of the timber that Huram brought, you know, they're putting these targets and these shields in this house. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. You know, a throne to sit on, and he overlaid it with pure gold. You know, this cat's got a lot of gold, and he's going to sit on it. You know, I mean, literally, he's going to sit on this gold on an ivory throne. You know, I mean, it's something else. But just the ivory, you know, the ivory's worth a pile of money. Ivory's hard to come by today because it's actually against the law to take ivory from elephants anymore. And, you know, because for a long time they were killing elephants just to get the tusks. And, you know, elephants got kind of scarce. So now it's against the law. But and there were 6 steps to the throne with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on each side of the sitting place, and 2 lions standing by the stays. So, you know, just gold everywhere. You know, it had to be immaculate. I'd love to have seen it. You know, it was. And 12 lions stood there on the one side, and on the other side, the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom, because Solomon's got most all the gold. Everybody's bringing it and giving it to him. No other kingdom could do what he was doing, because, you know, he had the market cornered on gold. You know, he was smart, and everybody was bringing it to him just to sit around and listen to the wisdom of Solomon. But, you know, he'd married a pile of women. 700 or so, you know. Between the wives and the concubines and everything, he had a bunch of them.
And that was 699 too many.
Well, we'll get into that in just a minute. And all the drinking vessels of King Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was not anything accounted in the days of Solomon. So, you know, everything that he drank out of, wherever he went, there was a drinking vessel of pure gold. You know, could you imagine picking up a glass, something to drink out of that's pure gold? You know,
Mine's plastic.
Mine, I drink out of a plastic, big old plastic cup, water, and but I've never imagined drinking out of even, you know, nothing was made of silver. He had plenty of silver, but they didn't make anything out of the silver. I guess the gold looked better. For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Huram. Have I done skipped over something? The king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Huram. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish bringing gold and silver, ivory, and apes, and peacocks. Them was monkeys.
They were. I mean, I didn't know if it might stood for something else.
I guess that, you know, they're bringing them
They get gold
peacocks.
and silver, I don't know what they.
Well, I was reading something today on that.
Same thing.
This is from a commentary from somebody, and they're saying that they had so much stuff. I mean, when you got so much gold or whatever, I mean, they want some kind of oddities, just like people today wants tigers and lions and all good stuff. So I guess that's what it was right here.
Yeah.
I don't know why they wanted the peacocks, because all that screaming and hollering.
Trying to
It
get
was
the wall.
welcome and his wives.
With all his wives too.
They
Yeah.
sound like women.
Oh, Lord. Hey, this guy,
He's
he
crazy.
had wisdom. God must have given him plenty of patience too. I don't
They
know.
must have.
He might be naughty here.
And King Solomon passed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. You know, and it's all because of the question that God asked him and the answer that he gave God. What would you do that I would give to you? What would you want me to give you? You know, and you know, Solomon could have asked for anything, but he asked for wisdom to judge God's people.
Didn't even ask for gold.
Huh?
Didn't even ask for gold.
Yeah, he didn't ask for none of this other stuff, but God gave it to him. You know, he was greater than any king anywhere in the earth. All these kings from everywhere, they just wanted to come sit with King Solomon just to hear the wisdom when he spoke. You know, I mean, it's amazing. And, you know, and verse 23, and all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart. See? I mean, all of them wanted to come and just visit with him. Let me come stay a day or two. Let me just come listen at you, maybe to help me in decisions I've got to make with folks in my kingdom and my country or whatever. You know, they just wanted to come here. Just to be in the presence of somebody that wise. You know, it had to be an awesome experience. You know, because, you know, God blessed him from the time he started until he died. Even though he did some things he should not have done. You know, he was still chosen of God, and he was still God's servant. You know, it's just like us today. You know, I want to say, I hope people can see in me that I am God's servant, but I want to tell you, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I sin. I don't want to say mistake. That just kind of puts a wrong idea in folks' minds sometimes. But, if I make a mistake, I might make a mistake adding something, but now, in my life, it's sin. And the Bible shares not to call it an error or a mistake, it's sin. So, but still, I love God, and I want my life to be an example to others. And even though I still sin, I've got an advocate with the Father. So has every one of us as a born-again Christian. We've got an advocate with the Father. We can get that sin covered. But there's so many people today that think because, hey, I gave my life to Jesus, I don't sin no more. But you know what? I don't find that anywhere in here. I can't find it in God's Word where a person ceases to sin. We're still in this flesh. The only thing, when that blood's applied to our life, when that blood is applied and that slate's wiped clean, when God looks at us, then He sees that blood. That's what He sees as perfect. This outward man is still sinful. This outward man, he still wants to show out once in a while. But I'm thankful we have an advocate with the Father. So, but, even though Solomon was not perfect, God blessed him from the time he started until he died. And God will do the same for us. And he goes on to share. And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold and raiment, harness and spices, horses and mules at a rate year by year. So every year, he's just gaining more and more and more and more because God's blessing him. But there's a problem with gaining more horses. And we're about to get to that. It says, and Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the chariot cities, and with the king at Jerusalem. So, Solomon had a huge amount of chariots and folks to run those chariots, horses to pull them. But, in the Mosaic law that was given, God told them not to increase the amount of horses they had or wives. And now he just keeps increasing the amount of horses, mules, and wives. He had to start off at some point with one. And, when he died, unless some of them had already died too, but at different points in his life, he had about 700 women, concubines, all this, he was wise. But I'm not going to get into that. But but the Mosaic law did share not to add horses or wives. But he had done all that. But all of us, the Bible shares, even in the Old Testament, there's not one good. No, not one. In the New Testament, the Bible, Paul shared in the book of Romans, chapter 3, verse 23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Every one of us. That includes Solomon. But, he was still sharing with people about God. These kings that would come and visit with him, he was showing them and sharing them about the sacrifices, the burnt sacrifice, the burnt offerings that they would do. That burnt offering pointed directly to Jesus Christ. So he was sharing with them what they needed to know about God, the one true and living God. So he was working things for God, even though he was human too. He did things wrong. He sinned. But, God would forgive him. And just like he forgives people today, God doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it says, and he reigned over all the kings from the river even unto the land of the Philistines and to the border of Egypt. Anybody in that area that counted themselves as a king, Solomon reigned over them. And, by the time Solomon dies, he has really a huge kingdom. Israel is at one of its largest points, landmass wise, with Solomon. But they're going to dwindle back down as time goes on, because they're going to be taken out of the land several times because of turning away from God and exactly what God had told them. I'll scatter you. I'll let you be taken captive. You'll be slaves to somebody else if you don't follow me. And in several times of that happening, a lot of their land was taken. And now they're down to just a little small area of land today. And the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar trees made he as the sycamore trees that are in the low plains in abundance. So, here the king is given silver and, precious stone. He's just an abundance of stuff. And, the sycamore trees, he would have the cedar trees made he as the sycamore trees that are in the low plains in abundance. So, planting trees and growing trees, and, it's just like, today, if we cut trees down, we need to replant trees. A lot of people do that when they go in and cut timber. They'll wait a little bit, they'll send folks in, they'll get all the stumps up and this kind of stuff, and they'll come back through there and they'll bed it up, and they'll come through with another machine that sets out pine trees. So, but just continuously regrowing, and that he would grow trees also. And they brought unto Solomon horses out of Egypt and out of all lands. And at that time, Egypt was known for some of the best horses in the world. And everybody was given to Solomon because they were amazed at his wisdom and just being around him. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer against Jeroboam the son of Nebat? Where are these books at? They're not a part of the Bible, but you can look up online and you can find things about these books. Some things were just not counted as,
Noteworthy.
right, to be a part of the Bible. Even though if you look at a Catholic Bible, if you ever go in a bookstore and you see a Catholic Bible, just look in it. There's a lot more books in it than what's in our King James Bible.
That canonization, is that the
Yeah.
word?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got something on that?
No, I never heard of
I
that
was waiting.
before.
I was waiting. I thought you might. And Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years. And Solomon slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David, his father. And Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his stead. And we're going to see what goes on with Rehoboam here next week. But, Solomon did a lot of good things. And one thing that he did, he did follow the instructions on building the temple. And he did follow the instructions to share God with different folks, and that's what he was doing here. All these kings and queens that came to see him, he was sharing with them about God. And he shared with them about the importance of the burnt offerings, because that was an offering to cover sin, and that directly points to Jesus Christ. So, anybody have anything on any of these two?